Tony D and Little Joan, and this is a response to some comments about the Good Times cartoon because the fallout from it has been very hilarious. I want to talk about it some more. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books. The links are in the description. Comedy Horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys, books 1 through 14, available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. Don't forget, Saturday, tomorrow, I will be at OC in the morning from about 10 to 12. Then I have to hop in the car, go up to Lakewood for the Lakewood Historical Society event, where I'll be talking about how to hunt the Jersey Devil. And then I'll be back on Sunday for the rest of OC at the Ocean City Music Pier. So, either one of those places this weekend. Big weekend. Hope to see you. Okay. So, the fallout from the Good Times trailer. Like, the cartoon hasn't even aired yet. But the trailer is friggin' ripping up the internet. Despite all the friggin' headlines in media right now. And there's a ton of them. And the people who made this horrific show should probably be thanking their lucky stars. There's so many distractions that it's not even worse. But I got some pushback, and I wanted to read you the comments. As always, I'm not even going to tell you who they are. You can go into my comments and see. But please don't talk to these people. Don't comment to them. I'll do that if need be, or I'll ban them if need be. But don't, I don't want anybody feel like they're attacked or whatever. But I am responding to comments, and if you're the commenter, well, here I am responding. So a commenter wrote, and now let me remind you, Good Times, they did a cartoon version of Good Times. It's supposed to take place sometime after, I think, the events of the original show. I think it's down the street, like some relatives of the original cast members, maybe, I don't know, but it takes place in the modern era, and it's been bashed because it just relies on a bunch of racial stereotypes, and it's really not very funny at all. So I had commented to that, talking about why I didn't like the trailer, why I think it'll be not a very good show. So this guy responded, the original Good Time show wasn't built around J.J. Walker. It started about the family, but then it evolved into being about J.J. and the comedic one-liners, and less about the family as a whole, an accurate representation and impactful storylines. Yeah, it's not a very good sentence structure. John Amos, the father, Ray, serious, I think he meant raised serious concerns. Maybe he's doing this on his phone and got auto-corrected. Raised serious concerns about it and was ultimately fired. Esther Roll quit not long after. The issues affecting black people in the inner cities in the 90s, he writes, are still prevalent and largely a result of systematic racism. The problem with this trailer is that it relies on harmful stereotypes and tropes about black people. That is why black people are not supporting it. Thank you, King of Black People. I wrote back, thanks for checking in, comrade. You can go back to your Marxist delusions now. That's not how television worked. He responded, what are you talking about? Why don't you actually explain your point of view in the response to what I said instead of being rude? Well, because I think you're being a dishonest actor in this, and that you don't even know what you're talking about. As always, people on the internet, they're a bunch of blowhards. You think I'm a blowhard? Oh my God. People who comment to me. So, first off, I don't know why he's talking about the issues affecting black people in the inner cities in the 90s are still prevalent. The original Good Time shows was made in the 70s, was really about the late 60s, when you think about it. If they make something, they probably started developing it in 1970 and then put it on the air a couple of years later. So I don't know what he gets on the 90s, why he's going back to the 90s. And even if he's just talking about the cartoon, like, why only go back to the 90s? Does he mean that, well, the 70s obviously weren't great. The show was made in the 70s. So were the 80s like cool? It's weird. It's weird he'll say he pinpoints the 90s as the time. It's probably when he grew up, I'm guessing. But of course, he blames it's largely the result of systematic racism. Well, thank you, Dr. D'Angelo, for your input. But again, that's mostly Marxist nonsense. There's no such thing as really, well, I shouldn't say there's no such thing. Systematic racism is blown out of proportion. Like, you could say there's racism. Certainly there's racism. Some of it was pretty organized in its own way. But these people who purport this see it under every rock, in my view. They see it under every single rock. And it has nothing to do with the development of a TV show, by the way. They don't sit down and go, how can we be more systematically racist? Well, I don't know. We got to make sure we keep the black man down. Like, that's not a writer's meeting. And it infuriates me that Marxists will imply that, like, yes, we must bring down the black person. No, and quite honestly, it's the opposite. In the 70s, when they were making Good Times, what they were really trying to do was bring black people to television in a nice way. And because there weren't a lot of black sitcoms on TV that weren't, well, I mean, I don't know what even was on before Good Times, quite frankly. I can't even think of a black show before Good Times. But, and you also have to understand that black people in the 70s were like the cool new thing. Now, black people weren't new, and they're not things, but Hollywood has always gone through fads, right? So right now, Hollywood is all about, I don't know, Marxism, trans people and whatnot. You roll the clock back 20 years ago, what were they constantly going on and on about? Well, in the early 2000s to the mid-teens, they were on and on about gay people, right? Oh, gay people. Got to put gay people. Like, oh, we got a new gay sitcom. Oh, there's a gay character in this. That's what the way they were in the 70s about black people. They were, oh, we got to put black people in it. Oh, black person. Look, black person. We're super progressive. And in some cases, it was cool, right? So on Star Trek, super cool. They put Uhuru in, and they treated her just like another member of the crew, because it was a military. The Federation was kind of a military, and the idea was the future where this wasn't even an issue. So it wasn't even an issue. They didn't say, oh, wow, Uhuru, you're doing really well. It's great that a black person is a communications officer. They wouldn't say stuff like that on the show. But they might say stuff about the show like that. And, you know, Star Trek had the first interracial kiss, I believe. So that, to me, was a way to portray the races getting along, because it just didn't even make a difference. But this new cartoon, it's full of racism, in my view. But the old show, they set about to present black people in a way that would do two things. One, that it would be the new hot trend, but two, that they would present the family in such a way that people would like them. Because if you like the characters, you'll watch the show. It's as simple as that. If the show were to be successful, they needed people to like the characters. So, and now he says the show wasn't built about wasn't built around J.J. Walker. It absolutely was. Again, you have to understand how they build the show. Now, I haven't been in a writer's meeting at this level, but I've been in other writers' meetings where they've developed shows and movies. And what you do is you sort of build it on the resources available. And one of those resources are often the stars that you have to put on the show. And you want to showcase the stars. J.J. Walker at that time was a hot radio personality and comedian in mostly Los Angeles, I think. I don't know if he was all that national before the show. But he was popular. And he was young, hip. This is the 70s. He was in, after the show hit, he was in various Teen Beat type magazines. I remember that. There was a magazine for the electric company. He would appear in that sometimes because it would always be Dynamite. That was maybe a little later, but after the show was hot. But they would, of course, build it around JJ. But the first episode would be a lot like the first episode of Family Guy. Because when you do a pilot episode, what you want to do is you want to showcase an episode that basically explains the show, introduces the characters, and gives you a taste of what you're going to see in the future. Right? The pilot episode is often very different from the rest of the episodes because they will tweak it after that episode. So if you look at the original pilot for Star Trek, well, they tweaked it quite a bit. They got rid of the captain. They put in Shatner. They changed it around, and then they ended up taking the pilot and remaking it. Then they did another pilot with Shatner, but even that one's a little different. So the first pilot episode, and I don't remember the pilot for Good Times, but I can totally 100% understand what it would be if I were to sit down in a writer's room to write it. First, you'd have to introduce all the major characters. That's number one. Gonna have to do so, all the major characters. Then you want to give them problems that are typical of what you're going to see on the show moving forward, right? So in the case of Good Times, they were jokes and bits about being poor, trying to make it, that kind of thing in a black community. However, this was also the early 70s on television. And what television was back then was family time, right? Families sat around and watched TV. The Good Times would have been on in prime time, probably around 8:30, something like that. And people would have been watching it sometime after dinner, right? So the idea during that era, and I lived during that era, so I know, most families maybe had one TV, maybe two, right? We had a second TV in my house when I was a little kid. That was black and white. I know people go, oh, black and white TV, what is that? Yeah, it had no color. The black and white TV would be in like your parents' bedroom, right? They would get to watch TV in their bedroom, not you. I didn't have a TV in my bedroom. Hell no. We didn't have enough money to buy me a TV. So the TVs in the house were the color TV in the main living room, and then a black and white, the backup TV, the old TV, would be in your parents' bedroom, where they could watch the monologue for the Tonight Show. So if you were going to watch Good Times, you would probably be sitting down watching it with your family because everybody was around the TV at that time. So if you're a little kid, you got nowhere to be. It's nighttime. Maybe it's not quite bedtime yet, and you're going to watch prime time television. Maybe till like 9 o'clock. Maybe if you're lucky, your parents let you stay up a little later at 10. Depends on how early you have to get up for school. And so that would be families watching the shows. So, and this would be network television. So you had three channels: ABC, NBC, and CBS. Fox didn't exist. You also had some local channels. They didn't really count. That wasn't network stuff. The new stuff that everybody was watching was on the three main channels: ABC, NBC, CBS. I forget which one this was on. I want to say, I don't know. I don't know which one. Could have been any of them. So, this was, the hot show. I don't know if my family watched it. I think I watched the reruns. But a family would sit around and watch this show. So that meant you had to have family type dynamics, right? You wanted to have mother, father, kids doing wacky stuff. And it had to be light and fun. Now, the show, like Good Times, like All in the Family and shows of that era, also had a certain grounding in reality because it came out of Norman Lear. And so they also dealt with issues. Because again, you have to understand, there wasn't a lot of this. Because, so for instance, I'll give you an example. I do a web comic called Superfrat, right? So on Superfrat, it's about a bunch of superpowered frat boys. They all have superpowers except one. And because of that, it was my only web comic for a long time. It was the only thing I was regularly publishing. And I do it, right now it's Tuesdays and Thursdays. I forget when we did it. I would write like a bunch of strips and Chris would draw them and we'd post them. I didn't really understand what I was doing. But it was my only outlet, right? So I did a bunch of funny stuff. But eventually, after doing it a while, we wanted to do other stuff with Superfat. So I believe it was Chris initially who actually, the artist, who actually suggested this, doing something with Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld, which was a little political. And, I wasn't opposed to it. I was just like, oh, wow, you really want to do it in politics? Oh, yeah, I'll lean into politics. You know me. So we did Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney at spring break. And it was pretty funny. But the only reason we did that is it kind of was the only outlet we had at the time for our message, or whatever you want to call it, for our creativity. So once in a while you want to stretch it because that's the only one. And but now I do the Webcomic Factory, right? And in the Webcomic Factory I do a different comic every single day. And there's different ones, right? I have all kinds of different comics on the site. So one of the comics is the anti-war comic where I could do political stuff. And then another comic is Miserable Comedians where I could do jokes, just straight up jokes. And then stuff like In a Relationship where it's just about relationships. So I don't need to necessarily drop political stuff in Miserable Comedians or In a Relationship. In fact, I usually avoid politics in a relationship. I hate my kids. I try not to do it. It's kind of hard for me sometimes because I've done so much political stuff, but there's no need to anymore because I have that specialized area. Television's the same way, right? Back then, they were trying to jam drama and comedy and statements on, giving a message or whatever. They didn't really have a lot of venue for that. But now everything's specialized. Everything's so atomized. You don't need to put that in a sitcom anymore. But back then, they would. And so, thus, there was a lot of stuff in the original Good Times. And there was a lot of progressivism type politics. But at that time, it was different. It wasn't meant to be destructive. There were a lot of things that still kind of weren't known. And which was ironic considering what the show was about. It was about a family struggling in the projects, which, if you know what projects are, they kind of screwed them up from the get-go. But this guy is criticizing because he thinks it's all about systematic racism in the 90s. Like, he's not even addressing the problem. I suspect strongly, I know this is a weird thing to say, but I think this might be a bot. I seriously think it might be either an AI bot or possibly a Chinese bot. In other words, like a Chinese, they've got bots and people working bots in China who got it kind of right, but he's missing the nuance because it feels a little bit like a foreigner. And the interesting thing about it was a second guy chimed in, threatening to leave my channel before he even became a subscriber, saying he didn't like the way I handled myself here, and basically agreed with this guy, I guess, which was weird. And he eventually wrote, "What are you talking about? Why don't you actually explain your point of view in the response to what I said instead of being rude?" Well, because number one, I think you're dishonest. Number two, you might be an AI bot or Chinese bot or just a general, I don't know, shill or whatever. I think you're incredibly dishonest for saying, like, that is why black people are not supporting it. I don't think you speak for all black people, even though you have a picture and you appear to be black. I don't know if that picture is legit. I don't know if you're legit. I would question everything on the internet. Which is why I don't, think I need to respond to you. I don't think I need to respond to anybody on these comments that I don't know. Like my fans who are in the live stream, I kind of know some of them. So if I see them, making comments, or someone who's a long time commenter, I have a commenter on Odysee, comments all the time. I usually respond to him. But I don't have any reason to believe that you're even a real person. So that's part of the reason why I don't care if I ever respond to this thing. Like, I'm not going to explain my point of view. I don't have to explain myself to you, random person on the internet. And it's kind of a trap. It's a trap because he wants me to explain myself so then he can pick it apart, right? But he's already not explained himself well, and I think he shows that he doesn't understand how shows are built. Of course they were built it around J.J. Walker. He was famous. He was the guy they pushed. And that's why the show kind of collapsed into him. You can say, well, John Amos, he had serious concerns and wanted to do all these serious things. Maybe. Or maybe he's an actor who wants to do more drama and wants more screen time, and JJ was stealing his thunder. It was a sitcom for families. Did they do serious things on Good Times? Yeah, they did. But there was only so far they could go before they would felt, this is too much. They wanted to keep the show light because it was for families. Yeah, you could do a serious thing if you want, but you couldn't do like King Lear level of drama. You had to keep it, I got a piece of lemon there. You had to keep it relatively family friendly. And JJ, once the show got going, was the face of it. Just like when they launched The Simpsons, initially Bart was the face of The Simpsons, but quickly Homer overshadowed him. Homer was the one everyone wanted t-shirts of. Now, they sold a lot of stuff with Bart, and Bart's pretty popular too, but Homer overshadowed him as the most popular character on the show. Randy on South Park did that to some extent too, depending on the era of South Park. Both shows have been on so long. In the case of J.J. Walker, though, he was the most famous person on the show. Now, Esther Roll and John Amos were famous. They were actors, but they didn't have the kids. These weren't people they were like, that a teenager would know. And that's who watched TV. The demo during that time was 18 to 35-year-old males. So an 18 to 35-year-old male was more likely to know who J.J. Walker was, especially if they were black, than John Amos or Esther Roll. They were just bonus uh, actors to get the older folks involved. That's all they were there for. And when they left the show, it didn't matter. It didn't matter to the producers because JJ, at least for a time, carried the show without them. And they just kept, I mean, look at what they did to Roseanne. They kicked Roseanne off her own damn show. It was named after her. And they still did the show. So, yes, it was 100% built around J.J. Walker. That's how you develop a show. The whole purpose of the show was to give J.J. an opportunity to come in and say the wacky stuff he said on the radio, because they saw that him saying that on the radio worked, and they wanted to bring that on TV. That's typically what they do with stand-up guys. Drew Carey, when he did the Drew Carey show, a lot of the bits on the show were stuff from his stand-up. I believe the character, his foil in the show, what's her name, Mimi? I think that's from his stand-up. If I'm not mistaken. That's how they do sitcoms. The problem with, I think, the Good Times reboot is, number one, it's not really built around anybody because it's a cartoon. So the guy who really built it probably is a guy like Seth MacFarlane. And I don't even know if he's only executive producer or producer. I don't even know if he has that much. He might just be lending his name to it. Big mistake, as it turns out. But he may have said, well, I'll put my name on it so it'll get made, but I'll hand it over to you guys to actually do the work. So maybe it is all written by black people. I don't know. By the way, one of the comedians on it is Slink Johnson, who played Black Jesus on the Adult Swim show. And I like Slink. He's pretty funny. He's really good in Black Jesus, if you haven't seen it. But on the cartoon, yeah, not very good, in my view. But that's not on him. And when you talk about Esther Roll and John Amos quitting, you know, they were actors. Maybe they got better offers. Maybe they just didn't like it for their image. The 1970s was a different time for television. There was money in it, but you were considered a lesser actor if you worked on TV. Real actors, quote unquote, worked on Broadway, or you had a movie career. Television was bottom barrel, especially in the 1970s. So the fact that actors quit a show because they were too good for it, there was nothing new about that. Nothing new at all. So if you were in a writer's meeting during then, you would have been talking about, how do we make this show family friendly? How do we work JJ in it so he could say cool stuff and be the cool guy that everybody wants to be? He was the Fonz of Good Times, if you remember the Fonz from Happy Days. That's an old reference, so I don't know if you even get it. But, so, talking about, oh, well, it's really about systematic racism. No. No one in that writer's meeting talked about systematic racism. Maybe some of the writers in the current Good Times reboot talked about systematic racism. That's part of their problem. That's not reality. The reality is, the reason the show is being blasted, the reboot is being blasted for relying on tropes, which you admit right here. What did you say? The problem with the trailers relies on harmful stereotypes and tropes about black people. To which I agree. I agree it does. You can do it if you hit everybody. Like, you would have to hit, you know, all the races like South Park or Old Family Guy to make that kind of comedy work. The problem, of course, is Good Times is about a black family. So, in the inner city. So, it's just supposed to be about the black family. Now, again, maybe if you had a live cast, you could have gotten away with it, because it could have been like you're taking those tropes and stereotypes and you're you're exaggerating them to a ridiculous degree. I mean, I think they tried to do that with the drug dealing baby, but I don't think it's working. Um, Again, you can't have the serious stuff in from old good times and current good times. You can't have serious stuff in and say, well, we're going to lampoon all the stereotypes about black people. If you're going to lampoon all the stereotypes about black people, well, you got to do something like the Boondocks, which there's been a lot of comparisons to the Boondocks. Not that this show's even close to that, but that the Boondocks did that, but did it successfully. Why? Why was the Boondocks successful as opposed to this? Well, the Boondocks, number one, had characters on it that were sane. So Huey, who's the main character, is very sane. He's sort of the social consciousness of the show most of the time, and that's why it's such a brilliant show. There are a couple of episodes where Huey's the one that kind of goes off the reservation. The other characters have to bring him back to Earth. But that show relies on a lot of stereotypes too, but they're very smartly controlled, and they're doing interesting things with them. You know, they're doing interesting things with the voices, and they're making really fun statements. And no one is immune in the Boondocks, you'll notice. I can't even say the bit that he did, but it was when you have a moment, a certain moment. I can't say the kind of moment it is because it has a bad word, but that was one of the bits on the show. The most brilliant episode, I think, is the episode where MLK comes back. It's like a what if MLK hadn't died, and then he comes back. He either comes back to life or he just never died. I think he comes back. And it's about how he would view black culture today. And he doesn't like it at all. Like, he's compared to most people in the black culture, he's extremely conservative. And I think he ends up moving to Canada at the end of the episode. Something like that. It's a brilliant, brilliant episode. Because it's taking apart not just, it doesn't just have stuff about racism in it, or racism. It's taking apart everybody. Anybody who's a hypocrite can be taken down in the Boondocks. In the reboot to Good Times, I don't even think it's taking down anybody. Who's it taking down? I mean, there's a moment where they try to do this serious moment, how people are dumping guns and drugs all in the neighborhood to get black people to kill each other. It's not funny. That's not funny, and it's not presented as funny. It's presented as some serious topic, but it doesn't ring true when everything else around it is a gross stereotype that isn't even funny. The drug dealing baby, maybe they could have made that work. I don't know. It was pretty weird that they did that at all. So, anyhow, the problem with these reboots are people who sit around and go, well, we got to tackle systematic racism. No, you don't. What you have to do if you have a TV show is, number one, you have to entertain people. That's number one. Number two, if you're going to do a reboot of Good Times, first you have to ask yourself, why would we do that? Is this something we need to do? Well, the answer, unfortunately, all comes back to money, as it always does. The studio owns Good Times. It's an IP, and they figured, well, if we're going to do a black sitcom, we happen to own Good Times. Hey, you want to redo that? It's likely, again, I had a friend who worked in the studio system, that somebody was going through the IPs that the studio owned, came across Good Times and said, hey, we own Good Times. Why doesn't somebody bring that back? And then maybe one of the producers contacted Seth MacFarlane. Would you be interested in doing a reboot of Good Times? That would be, it's a Norman Lear project. We can have your name associated with Norman Lear. It would look very good for you. We'll pay you tons of money. And they developed this show. Very likely. Um, you know, when they developed the J.J. Walker show, that was at a time when stars had power, right? Because J.J. became a big star mostly because of that show nationally. Prior to that, he was a big star, probably just in California. But, you know, he was in national magazines for years after that. I would see pictures of him and it would say, Dynamite! So it really, you know, his career exploded after that. He's still famous for Good Times. Whereas no one's really all that famous in the Good Times reboot. J.B. Smoove, I know from Curb Your Enthusiasm. Slink Johnson, I didn't even remember his name. Later I looked him up, like, oh, that's Black Jesus. Nicole Brown is from Community, but like Jeremy at the Quartering did a video about the same trailer. He didn't remember any of those people, and I'm sure he probably knows at least the Community woman. He just doesn't know her name. Celebrities aren't as famous as they used to be. They're not promoted. And because they were in a cartoon where you don't actually see their faces, like if I had saw that it was Slink Johnson doing the voice, oh, I would have been like, there's Black Jesus. I know that dude. Because it's a cartoon, yeah, it kind of takes you out of it. Because it's a cartoon, you didn't even need all those people unless you were going to promote them. Like if you had promoted them, like, hi, I'm JB Smooth, and I'm doing the voice of so-and-so for Good Times. Watch it now. That would be different. They're not doing that. They put out this trailer and, you know, it's not doing very well. So, another lesson from that is, you know, if you're an actor, doing voice gigs is a really good gig, by the way, because if you're a union, they're going to pay you a lot of money. However, they're probably going to do your voices in about a week. So you get paid for a whole show, and you come in for about a week and do your work, and then the show's done. The show is done, you know? You're done on the show for the rest of the year. And that's enough money to live. And you got the rest of the year to look for other acting gigs. So, yeah, actors love those kinds of roles. I wish I could get one. I think I'd be good. I think I'd be good on a cartoon, right? I have a good voice. But anyhow, getting back to the commenter. Look, it's the internet. I don't care if you want to spout your mouth off about things you don't seem to know about. It's fine. But you don't get to demand I respond to you. I did it here, mostly because I don't think you'll ever see this. And if you do, you know, you could respond in the comments, but say something sensible. You know, don't demand that I explain myself. You explain yourself. Explain why you don't know how television works. Explain why you don't think they built the show around J.J. Walker, the celebrity that they had to be in the show. Okay? Explain why you know, your Marxist nonsense. Don't demand an explanation from me. My views are not at issue here. Yours are, in my opinion. Anyhow, that's it for me, Tony D, and Little Joan. Check us out on Odysee, Bitchute, and Rumble for more base takes. If you can find a more base take than that, I say take it. Again, don't bother this dude in the comments, please. I will be at OCCon this Saturday, 10 to 12-ish. And then I got to hop in the car, go up to the Lakewood Historical Society for the 2 p.m. talk on how to hunt the Jersey Devil. Then I'm back at OCCon on Sunday, all day Sunday, at the Music Pier. Hope to see you there. We'll see you in the next one.